me start with you. Well, you've been listening to these conversations. What do you see as some of the challenges of complexity from really inside an organization?
Well, I would say for Herman Miller, I run the North America business, so we're an office interiors business. We spend a lot of time studying these problems that we all have talked about this morning, this complexity at work. And Chandra, you're talking about work process, and that's right in the zone of where we are spending all of our energy today, is how do we create the environments that enable an organization to reach its purpose by carefully studying the culture of that place, the work that people do, the modes of work that are in that location, and then the settings of work that get woven into a landscape so that there is a highly effective place for those folks to be and that they want to be. So we found it so interesting recently that Marissa Meyer from Yahoo said, no more working at home, come in. What is she asking for, right? She's asking for that synthesis that happens when people get together, those unplanned collaborative experiences that she felt was lacking in that organization. So I would say one of our challenges right now, and Peter Drucker always talked about this, and Rick and I work together a lot from the Drucker Institute, what are we not going to do? Because Rick, to get to your simplification comments a moment ago, of everything we could do, we spend a great deal of time trying to figure out what is the priority and sequence of everything that's possible. There's a subset of things that we should do, and then we have to simply decide what we're going to do. And that's a real challenge. I'd say as an operator, a person who, your other comment you made a moment ago, Rick, was you have shareholders, I have shareholders. And so in the context of everything we're trying to do, including manage those expectations, which sometimes are their expectations, not my expectations, right? Sometimes it's their estimate, not my estimate, that we sometimes have to think about. That is a real challenge, I think, for us, because we're excited. We're not a furniture company, really. We're in the people business, and it's so much why I love my association with the Drucker folks. He was a behavioralist at the end of the day, about helping people realize their full potential. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's an enormous sea of potential. So getting it down to what are we going to be great at and trying to deliver those in a way that really serves our customers is tough. And then you got the shareholder knocking on the other door. And if I'm trying to drive decisions deep into the organization, it means I've got to be willing to have people make gigantic mistakes. And they have to know I'm going to back them. If they make the decision and they're wrong, that I'm behind them anyway.
Linda, I told Curt, I gave away probably 250 copies of the book written by a former president of his great company, and it's called Leadership, Max Dupree. Leadership is an art, and it really talked about covenantal relationships. And I mean, the mafia, best la Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, and Herman Miller is that kind of a company. And boy, that's the glue that holds it together, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But just before we go into Clas, Curt, I just want to go back to this thing about it's about not doing things, because that very much resonates, I think, with Chandra's point, doesn't it? His point about workflows is that all that happened is that we simply put technology into work. We actually didn't take anything out.
That's exactly right.
So that all technology has allowed us to do is to technicalize bureaucracy. And you're saying we need to go back to saying what is it we don't do.
And that's hard work because it's often overlooked how difficult that is. Organizations of all sizes pick up a momentum at some point, and they start to continue to do the things that they've always done for all of the obvious reasons. And oftentimes the glamorous work is to go ahead on the front end, the innovation side, and everyone wants to pour their energy there. And it's equally important, and there was a great article in the Harvard Business Review, which we read as a team some time ago, talking about every organization has to have the innovation efforts properly fueled and directed and all of that experimentation going on there. But there's also this excellence side, the operational aspect, and what I call the performance engine. So, you know, I happen to be a person who likes motorized vehicles and things like that. So I like to tinker with my airplanes and my cars and things on the weekends. And I have folks on my team that are exceptionally good at running the engine room parts of our business. And they would be the wrong people to have on the front end trying to think of the new innovative and imagine what's around the corner. So balancing the skills across the team becomes really important because I've got to continually repurpose energy from the back end back to the front end and have folks feel good about the fact that they're yielding that energy to some new purpose. And that's a daily challenge. That's something that I think every great organization has to become even better at every day, that repurposing forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. My research at the moment is held in a group called the Future of Work Consortium, which involves about 60 companies around the world. And we've got them all on, in London, and then we put them into thousands of people actually into a 3-day jam and asked them to talk about some of these issues. And the two things they said that they really hated most about complexity were the use of email and performance management systems. And it seems to me that those are the sorts of things that we need to be thinking about. How do we deal with email, and how do we deal with these old-fashioned bureaucratic processes? Clas, I mean, you run an R&D center that goes all around the world. I mean, how are you really dealing with some of these issues of complexity?
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. I mean, many things have been already said on this panel, how to deal with the complexity. Yeah, that's true. We have about 70% of SAP's global R&D is currently outside of the headquarters. And we have purposely chosen to do that and not keep everything in nice southern Germany, close to Heidelberg, but rather go out to the world, to have really access to global talent in different parts of the world, and of course, to untap the potential of local networks, right? Because we strongly believe as well that not every network is already, let's say, in a global scale and available to be untapped in an online scenario, but as well, if you want to work together really on something with IIT in New Delhi or with the Fudan University in Shanghai, you better be there, and you can have people and students meeting. So today we have actually software development in more than 100 locations across the globe, 15 major labs which have 500 to 5,000 R&D staff. The four biggest are Germany, Silicon Valley, Bangalore in India, and then Shanghai where I've been living. And being a German company, of course, we apply a certain intelligence structure and location strategy to this problem so that the organization constantly learns how to deal, let's say, take projects from one area, distribute it to another, see what kind of knowledge we find. So we have really moving huge part of our software development from Israel to Shanghai or from Bangalore in Silicon Valley and vice versa. And we don't do this for cost reasons or so, but mainly for the knowledge reasons and to bring the right people and the right knowledge together. I think Chandra spoke about, what was it, NOMI, the communication platform. That's of course very important that we connect people in such a platform. And of course we have applied, there's a gentleman here from Porsche Consulting, they have advised us as well to apply lean methodology. That means methodology from manufacturing into software development. So we basically break down development groups of thousands, 2,000 people into teams of 10. And those teams of 10 are then independent units that can really make their own decisions, right? And basically decide. Every day they meet, sit around the table, some people may be virtually on the screen, and then they make decisions what to do for the day. So that has helped a great deal to get software much faster out of the door than before. And I can only agree what has been said. I think purpose is very important. So the individual in the end has to feel this burning purpose to make a change, to make a difference. We recently developed a complete new innovation for the so-called Kirana stores in India, 10 million retail stores. We developed a new device for them which they can now connect basically to their distribution centers and to the big manufacturers. So far they had only a piece of paper and the whole inventory was in the head. So that of course leads to issues in the supply chain. They don't have everything on stock and they lose business opportunities, right? And the shop owners want of course to have more business. And by how have we come to this new model was really to bring people into those shops, have them sitting there for 2-3 weeks and understand really the basic principles of this business and not starting from a huge complex technology, let's do it mobile and kind of, because that is where all my engineers initially started. Yeah? And I said, look, after 3 months it was clear that that can't work. And again, why I have wanted to stress on this point is I had only 4 people on that project. yeah, which involves actually now already thousands of retailers. And then there were about 100 more who joined voluntarily over weekends and night shifts just to be part of this, usually working on other projects. So this is really when people feel a strong sense of purpose and urgency. And that helps as well to reduce complexity to a great deal. And the other thing is, complexity is as well standing in front of most colleagues as a matter of uncertainty. So what am I going to do next? How do I solve this huge issue now? Our technology indeed gets more and more complex. So the cultural aspect of this, and I think Chandra, you just spoke about this, the diversity. We know, for example, in India, people have a very strong sense they can really deal easily with uncertainty. So many projects where we have a huge amount of uncertainty, we do it in India because the cultural fit is just better there, right? If I do that in Germany, my colleagues may find 1 million reasons why it's not going to work. Yeah? And so they would all list out maybe first all the good reasons, they go through it very deeply, whereas maybe in India, from a cultural context, colleagues would rather just jump and try out something, right? And that, in the end, helps them with a trial-and-error approach to get to results. Yeah? So that doesn't mean that one region or one area is better than the other. Then there may be other projects where it is important indeed to pre-think the whole design very deeply, engineer it all through, and that may be something we do then in Germany. So
you know, could I add a comment to that? Yep. That makes me consider, you know, the core business that I'm responsible for is the one you would think of, large office buildings full of offices and the equipment that's in there. And that business moves fairly slowly. Organizations are waking up and asking, how do I repurpose my space to make it more powerful? And that business, like your description, is cautious and it's big. It's like a super tanker. It moves very slowly. And what we've done is created smaller business units around the edges of our business, which came up in an earlier conversation today, to experiment and learn and grow more quickly into other areas. So it's different from a geographic difference, as you described. But in the North America business, I've got 3 or 4 businesses that are all part of my team. Some that are small and quick and agile, some that are big and move slowly. Yep. And you have to put the right people in each place. Yeah.
Well, that's true. And if nothing else helps, sometimes we go at certain projects even to a war room approach, that we really bring 40, 50 people into one room for 2 months or from all over the world to get one specific problem fixed, right? Yeah. So if we really need all the brains to work through it, this is sometimes still the best approach despite all the technology we have.
Yeah. I started this conversation by saying the marvelous thing about this panel is that it's full of people who are practically wrestling with complexity. Now in this room, there's a whole lot of people who write for The Economist. Well, there's one person who writes for The Economist. There's one person who writes from the Financial Times. There's lots of us who blog. So I'm going to ask, on behalf of all of us who are writers in this room, to try and pull out from the 4 of you the 10 tips. Everybody knows this, don't they? So we can all write it down, we can all blog, and we can see who's the 10 tips for managing complex organizations. So we'd like it to be as specific and practical as possible. 10 tips. And then I'm going to ask everybody else, because I bet you've got tips as well. Number 1. Who's our first tipper here?
The simplicity piece. Back to...
it's got to be practical.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yep. Simplicity, yeah.
I would say, you talked about what not to do. Everybody who joins our organization, we not only have kind of the mantra of what our purpose is, but next they hear Pareto's principle, which basically most things don't matter. Right. And to figure out what the 20% of the things that do matter, and we teach them then to distill it down, what are the core drivers? And many companies don't do that. They don't distill down to what matters most in an organization. There's a wonderful company worth following, $20 billion US called Illinois Tool Works. They manage everything by this whole Pareto's principle. And he was an 18th century Italian economist that studied wealth distribution, and he basically found out that it does work this way with most everything. So we utilize that so that pretty much, Curt, as you said, so we won't do the things that don't matter and burn off resources, time and other resources.
Great start. Who's next?
I would say one thing that I do practically is I try to make things very visual. So I have a room. Rick's been in my room. Some would call it a war room, but it's really the room we run the North America business from. And it's real simple. Everyone on my team, all 12 of the people that run the various parts of the business, are illustrating to us continually what is the condition of their part of the business. And they're just talking to us. And that room, to me, has two purposes. One, it gives me an idea every day when I walk in there, how's everybody doing? How are they feeling? But the room is also really important because it describes the transparency that we have to have among ourselves. Yeah. So the room is a visual illustration of our teamwork together. I have to be able to see everyone. I want them to see each other. And if one of us is needing help, we can help that person. So there's data and information that's useful, made visual. We can see how the business is behaving. But the bigger thing to me is the visual of the teamwork and how we're working together. So I try to visualize things is maybe my tip on that.
Thank you. That's a marvelous second tip. Where's our third tip? Curt?
Yeah, I could maybe add what John Hagel this morning already said very vocally here, that make intelligent use of external networks, right? We have this SAP developer network with nearly 2.5 million software developers across the globe. And John mentioned this morning, a typical problem posted there takes 17 minutes to get resolved. Yeah. This is actually much faster than our hotline could ever do this. So in a way, this is as well solving many things that appear to be complex, but where out in the world is somebody who just knows how it works. So this is maybe a simple way forward. And I think in many businesses this could be applied.
This is where we're brilliant. We've got figure what you don't need to do, visualize it, speed it up. Chandra, what's your...
I've got two or three. First one is, I think with all these changes of technology, you can get carried away. So it's important to, what I call as reimagine your business in the context of these technologies. That is, whether it is my business process, whether it is what I sell, whether it is my channel, everything else, who is my customer, all these things were decided long back when all these technologies didn't exist. I call it the digital five forces. With all these technologies, now you can do things differently. So it's important to sit back and think about how your business will look like in the context of this technology if you want to really use the power of these technologies. So I think reimagine. Reimagine your business.
So can I just ask you to say, so for the people out here, if they wanted to reimagine their business, what does that mean? How would they do that?
What does it mean is, for example, you have this whole mobility, mobile phone. All of us think mobile phone is a great device, but the mobile phone has become more powerful because of cloud. Because mobile phone has restricted capacity in terms of processing power and storage, but the moment it's it's connected to the cloud, it has got infinite power. And the same thing, if you take a social is kind of digitized the whole world, because anything that you do immediately, you see response. So that social is also getting more powerful because of the cloud. So all these things really make a lot of things much easier than what you did before.
But you're a CEO of an IT company. For people here, for the readers of our blogs and our articles, how do they reimagine their business? I'm still not clear about how would somebody out here do that?
So in your business, if you have a workflow, how do you do it today?
So you look at the workflow.
You do your workflow and then see how you do it. If it is a business process, how would you look at your business process in the context of these technologies? Second one, I feel you need new listening tools.
Right.
Because a lot of things are happening. You cannot be reacting to everything. So figure out how to listen. Because it's not about reading newspapers, or it's coming from information, it's coming from everywhere.
So what would be your specific example of how people could learn to listen?
So in a technology company like us, we have got what we call as a listening platform. Okay? If you're running not a technology company, any business, You need some mechanism to be able to pull data, pull information of what's going on related to your business in the different channels. And then there needs to be a, I don't know, a cell or a tool or something like that, so that you know what's going on. Otherwise, you don't even know what's going on. You're trying to develop strategies without knowing what's going on. So listening is very critical, and listening in today's context is very different from the way we listened before. So listening is very important. Third thing is, keep the communication between, whether it is your employees or suppliers or in your ecosystem, there is going to be Gen X, Gen Y, and millennials. So figure out what is the best communication method for you. Rethink your communication. Rethink your communication, rethink your listening, and then reimagine your business.
Thank you.
You know, Linda, on that point.
That takes us to 6.
Huh?
Does that
Yeah,
6?
up to 6,
On
yeah.
that point, Chandra, you know, one thing that we do, if you can imagine a 2-axis chart, with the vertical axis is the commercial impact of an idea that we're considering. And it's not just revenue or economic value added. It could be a branding decision that's hard to measure. So is it a big or small commercial impact? And then based on our current capabilities, is it easy or hard for us to do? So we throw ideas around this thing, and we use it as a tool to help guide this, almost your reimagination, because some things that are further out, further away from our current capabilities, we might have to do them. Yeah. But we know it's going to take a lot of energy to get there, and then we prepare ourselves for that. So
at least you are aware of the possibilities. You don't have to do them,
Yep.
but you need to be aware of what the possibilities
yeah,
are.
right.
I think we need at least to add, from a technology point of view, the analysis and prediction, right, of what's going to happen. Because we have, of course, much better technology opportunities today to get through this big data thing, analyze things within split seconds. And I know that this afternoon, Professor Gomez and Professor Turner had actually discussed this quite controversially. Where does it make sense? But I believe there are many business situations where it indeed makes sense to have a very good analysis and some kind of initial prediction of different scenarios, because the amount of data is meanwhile so huge that you cannot just sit with gut feeling. So that adds basically to your listening skills. I would say there's a, let's say, technology listening skill more and more companies, as well governments, are using today, right? And I've been living half of my life in emerging markets, and I think to predict things like where the next traffic jam is in Sao Paulo would have been often very helpful. In India, you should actually, you would be able to predict today where do you have electricity grid issues that can be predicted relatively good, or in China to predict just where I live today, what is the pollution situation tomorrow. Yeah? So very relevant issues actually for the people, where today I get an email by the school of my kids in the morning, please don't send your children, the air quality is not good enough, right? So stay at home. But that could be done maybe in a different way. So.
Clas, can I pick you up and then we'll, on this question of scenarios, because for those of us who have been in strategy for many years, there was a whole idea, wasn't there, that would be a lot of scenario planning going on. And in fact, some companies like Shell, for example, still do scenarios. But I just don't see many examples of companies actively using scenario planning. How many people here are in an organization or have seen an organization where they actively use scenario planning, i.e. they actually build more than one scenario and then try and understand, you know, how the possible outcomes would play out? Does anybody here do that? Just one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, 6, 7, 8, 9. Can you just tell us why you would recommend that more people actually pick up what we thought, 20 years ago was going to give us a lot of ability to think about complexity? Do you use scenarios?
We use it for some, let's say, more long-term strategies, right? So let's take a thing like whether we go to Africa and in which way. So there may be different scenarios we take into consideration, and with multiple parameters, right? And then it's as well helpful again to, with all the uncertainty around, to have at least different ways how we would predict then the outcome of some things. But of course, it has to be limited, and here I agree to what was said this afternoon already, to things we can predict with a certain likelihood. Otherwise, it's really more relying on luck, right, and gut feeling.
Yeah, thank you. Rick, I know you've...
I was going to add move it back to more the human side of it, because again, I think when you get down to boots on the ground, it's individuals who implement. One of the great levers is diversity. And I contributed, I think it was last month, to an article in Harvard Business Review where they were talking about the whole subject of globalization. And I was making the critical point of view that typical American companies, they call their core business core, and everything else is international. Wait.
We're aware of that.
The U.S. is 5% of the world's population. And it's interesting, Susan and my friend Fareed Zakaria wrote a great book called The Post-American World, The Rise of the Rest. This gets me to the subject of diversity. Starts with the management team. We don't have an American, I've lived and worked here in Europe, Hong Kong, back in New York, different places, and my number 2 is a Brit. I deal with that. The head of manufacturing is Belgium, head of HR, German. If you can imagine human relations and that, we make that work too.
We don't have any stereotyping on this platform, by the way.
I generally take shots at Americans, but our management teams are from all over the world. And I always start my meetings when I'm doing, because I believe what's going to be one of the big keys in the future is communication. And if you can have diversity, and interesting, I bring up, it's a lightning rod, you know, at Davos, of diversity. We start off with, okay, oh, is that the women thing? We do a whole seminar on the difference between men and women, and we get down to the point. That difference is leverage. Women, I always kid that if we talk to scientists, which I'm certainly not, women have this thing called corpus callosum, men do too. But they have 30% more than we do, which means, think of it, right brain, left brain, they have Wi-Fi in the brain. Man can single task. I will have lost my phone.
All night, can't we?
She's there, talking on her phone, raising a kid, got 3 conversations. We have learned the power of women in our organization. So more of, I have 5 succession candidates, all in their 40s. 3 are women. They've all been with us since their 20s. Two are obviously the only other thing there are, men. Only 1 is an American. And that's a power for us out there.
So, Rick, one of the things that Yves Dose, who's sitting here, where is he? Where is Yves? There you are. We were talking, over coffee earlier, we were talking about our dear friends Nokia, because both, well, Eve has written a great deal about it, and I've written something. And one of the things that we were just thinking about is whether the fact that they were all from Finland and all men and mostly technologists running the company, whether that made it more difficult for them to deal with complexity. I mean, when you said diversity is important, what's the link that you're making with managing complexity? Why is it, do you think, that diverse teams are more able to manage complexity?
They see things we don't see. If you have representation on your management teams, at your headquarters, your regional offices, and on the ground, they understand it. When there are crises, we deal with many different foreign currencies, many different laws. We have people out there that are close to that, that represent that. I was a navigator in the Navy, and still, you would come into a foreign port, we would have a pilot come aboard. The pilot who knew that skinny water in that particular area. Yeah. Diversity gives you this ability of having local knowledge and understanding, and what they make is clear what was unclear. And then we leave knowing more.
We've had 9 absolutely brilliant ideas about how to manage complexity. We've had figure out what not to do, visualize and simplify, speed it up by building external networks, reimagining the business, create new listening tools, rethink communication, think about what's important and how difficult it will be, trying to predict what will happen and think about using scenarios and build diversity. We've got 1 more to go before we add, I open it up to the audience. Final, number 10. Who's coming in with number 10? Well, maybe should we get number 10 from the audience?